OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
7:30, you're welcome along to OTB AM. It is Owen and Adrian with you right the way through until 10 o'clock this morning. And for the third consecutive morning, we have an Irish medal to tell you about at the Olympic Games in Tokyo. Aidan Walsh, the man overnight who won his bout in the quarter-final to qualify for a semi-final and guarantee himself with at least a bronze. He is going to be fighting again in the early hours of Sunday morning. So that's 3 medals in the bag for Team Ireland at Tokyo 2020 so far. Still to come, we have Kurt Walker and Kelly Harrington, who will be well within a shout of grabbing a medal as well. We've got Rhys McClenaghan's final in the pommel horse still to come. And of course, there is the golf. People who've been up early this morning will know that Ireland are well in contention in the golf at the moment. Rory McIlroy on 8 under par, Shane Lowry on 7 under par after 17 and 16 holes respectively. The leader, Carlos Ortiz, is on 9 under par. So tomorrow into the third round, we will certainly have 2 Irish golfers well in the hunt on that front. So at London 2012, Ireland won 6 medals. In terms of volume, not in terms of gold medals, in terms of pure volume of medals, that is Ireland's best ever return at an Olympic Games. So in terms of volume, it is very much achievable that Ireland could match that now at this year's Games. So a very positive start to the weekend, Adrian Barry.
It's absolutely class. And looking at I was got up for something again last night in the middle of the night, obviously. And it's brilliant. It's just brilliant to look at when they're doing so well. It's such a great bounce. They're such great characters. Like looking at Kelly afterwards, I nearly called her Katie, and she's headed in that direction by all accounts. Looking at her during the fight, how composed she was and controlled she was, picking out her punches, and we'll get into the technicalities of it running later on, but looked like a real technical masterclass, and probably to the same degree with Aidan Walsh a bit later on. But yeah, just like savagely clinical stuff, like non-emotional stuff even afterwards from both of them. And Aidan Walsh's interview afterwards is one of the highlights of the games, I have to say, for me so far. Brilliant.
Yeah, that's one of the key things, is that himself and Michaela, just even if you just keep it to that family just for a moment, are 2 of the most likeable Olympians Ireland have ever had. And then you throw Kelly Harrington into the mix as well, and you're just rooting for her at every step of the way. Like, I think Harrington, almost in her post-fight interview, that there is a temptation to try and get her to speak about the real medal hopes that she has and how far she can go into this tournament, and she's got no interest in talking about it whatsoever. I'm not sure, is it the delay to the games maybe? Is it due to the fact that she's had to wait so long even before the delay to this games to actually be a representative for Ireland? But God, she is in the zone right now. She has no interest in any distraction whatsoever, and even entertaining the possibility of talking about a medal bout or any of that nonsense right now. She is here and is trusting the process, to use that phrase, at the moment, and she's totally dialed in.
Yeah, and that's the way to do it. And you're absolutely right. Like, looking at it last night, and she had obviously got a buy into the round of 16. She had seen some of her main competitors, including, you mentioned Dubois there, and I read a piece with her in The Guardian during the week. Really, somebody who Kelly Harrington has beaten really recently in the European qualifiers, but somebody who has really big hopes here as well, and like much younger than Kelly Harrington, let's say. But yeah, certainly, like, people who haven't seen the fight last night might be sort of waiting to catch up with her. It was just, she was really dominant throughout, wasn't she? She controlled each round, was always ahead in the scorecards. It was one of those that was never really in doubt. Like, I know Aidan Walsh towards the end of his fight was they were the commentator was saying that the referee was kind of giving him a bit of a finger wagging as to stop running around the ring necessarily. Like, looking, if you're ahead and there's medals on the line, you're going to do whatever the hell it is to get you over the line. But no, not with Kelly. She was really controlled. So we'll see. Like, there's just big few days to come. And the boxing team particularly, like, I remember over the previous few Olympics on, like, the team, we obviously get big teams in, they would progress, and as it was like they almost progressed in a very linear fashion, in that, like, you've had 6 going through, and then 1 or 2 would get knocked out, and then 3 or 4 would advance, and 1 or 2 more would get knocked out, and it kind of followed that pattern. But this game has been a little bit different in that we've had a big amount of fighters exiting early on, but it does look as if the cream is rising to the top, hopefully, over the next few days.
Absolutely, and we've had the athletics up and running as well overnight. We're going to be joined by Cathal Dennehy from the Olympic Stadium in Tokyo very shortly indeed. But the main news really there is that Ireland's 3 hopes in the 800 metres all failed to get out of their heats. It was always going to be an incredibly difficult task for all 3 of them. I think the most disappointed out of the 3 of them would have been Nadia Power, because she ran a little bit off her own personal best, and you could tell in her interview on television afterwards that she was disappointed. Now, in fairness, herself, Louise Shanahan and Siofra Clary-Butner all did well to be there and are all kind of bolters when it came to this team, certainly in the context of the games being pushed back and the games happening in 2021. So their eyes will certainly be on bigger things at the next games. But even within the context of this, I think you could tell from Power's reaction afterwards that she was there to compete and there to try and qualify, and she fell short of that. Tom Bardo showed up. He was in the lane right beside Carson Warholm for his 400-metre hurdles heat, which is an unenviable position to be in. We'll get Dennehy's take on that about actually is that an unenviable position to be in, because he's going to be the guy setting the pace anyway, and once you're on his shoulder to a certain degree, you're going to power through. But he had to kick on quite a bit in the last 100 metres to ensure that he got second place in his heat to get a good draw for the semi-finals, and he'll go again in that. But it's an unbelievably stacked event, the 400-metre hurdles, and getting to a final from Tom Barr's perspective will be a really good result. In the sailing then, just to move it away from the athletics, Annalise Murphy finished 40th in race 10 in the laser radial. So as you can imagine, that is not going to be good enough to get her into position in the medal race. She has finished 18th overall, the top 10 get into the medal race. So I think Annalise's poor start and that unfortunate kind of tangling with the Fijian boat on day one has ultimately cost her, because she had a brilliant day yesterday, and maybe if she'd started better and finished better and with a bit more fortune, she could have made it into the medal race. And then the 49ers, Rob Dixon and Sean Wadilove, were 9th in race 9 and 14th overall. They have 3 races tomorrow now, and they'll be doing the exact same thing. Try and make it into the top 10 and try and make it into the business end of things there. The other thing overnight that a lot of Irish eyes will have been on was the hockey, Ireland against India. India won the game 1-0, and probably deservedly so. They could have been in the lead at half-time. Aisha McFerrin, the true possibly world-class player that Ireland have, was the saviour once again. She kept the score down against the Dutch a few days ago, and she was brilliant again in the first half, but India did find their winner in the second half, and Ireland will now need to beat Team GB tomorrow to get through to the next round, which is what you want, Adrian. You want just those high stakes and a little bit of magic dust on that event tomorrow. May as well lose to India tomorrow to ensure that Team GB game is a do-or-die game.
Yeah, we'll see. Like it's been actually, even when you mentioned the sailing there, it's not been a great games for the viewer at this end of the world. And I know that some of the athletics obviously will slip into a point where people might actually be out of the scratcher and won't have to get up in the middle of the night. But like, I remember the way that we followed Annalise, for example, at the previous games, and you knew it inside out. We were joking about it at the start of the Olympics that you knew about the upwind and the downwind, and she should have taken the lee side or whatever it would have been. And it's just we haven't had that same investment, and we're not. It looks like maybe going to have it now from that performance last night. She's been, I mean, I'd be interested to hear from her afterwards and get her take on it and technically why it all fell the way it did. But she's been, like, from the highs of finishing in the top 5 across a couple of races to been right out of the mix. It must be an incredibly tough. It must have been incredibly tough games for her. And the golf as well, on the lads have wrapped up there just in the last, well, Lowry's actually playing the 18th, but following Rory McIlroy is, when you're invested in wanting to do well, it's a tough thing to do, and it has been across his career. When he's standing over putts that you think he should be getting, and he's just not nailing them, and it's been kind of the case for him again this morning. But he, including a bogey now on the 18th, he had been one of the best rounds of the day, and it still is on 500 par, the 66. But he's home on 700, and that's 3 back now from the Mexican leader. And Lowry's on the same score playing the last. So look at their two of them very much in the mix. And like, you know, if they're in the melting pot come Championship Sunday on or whatever it is, that I presume it'll follow the same type of schedule, will it? That I'm presuming if I'm a golfer, if I'm part of that committee, I'm like, listen, follow the same schedule. So it will totally take on a life of its own, won't it? Come Sunday then, if the two lads are in the mix, and suddenly a sport that we didn't, I mean, did we really care about it that much until the two lads are in the mix? Suddenly we've all got our tricolours out, and we're going for it on Sunday. I'm
not going to lie, the golf at Rio 2016 didn't really move the needle for me whatsoever. But things are different now. I think golf as a game has just got more popular over the last 5 years. I think that's it. It's just a more important sport. And
I thought you were going to say over the last 5 hours.
Yeah, over the last 5 hours as well. I think when it comes to the Olympic movement, I think in those 5 rings, I think we can find a golfer's heart in there somewhere. And I think that the medals will be worth a lot more this year than they were in Rio. And I think if we happen to have an Irish winner at the end of the week, then so be it. I'm personally looking forward to Rory McIlroy winning gold and running around Tokyo with a tricolour around his neck with rebel songs playing and revealing himself as a true Irish patriot as things go on. But it could be himself or Lowry. They're both very close in those scores at the moment. So we'll keep you up to speed on that as they come home, and Lowry just about to finish off there. One thing we should mention as well from last night, a brilliant win for Bowes, beating Dudelange 3-0 and to stay progressed to the next round to play Pauk. And Gavin Comiskey in the Irish Times writing here that Pauk just beat Feyenoord 2-1 in a pre-season friendly, so the standard goes right up. But a brilliant moment for them once again last night at the Aviva Stadium, and brilliant financially obviously for them, progressing through the rounds in the Conference League. Adrian, I just do want to tee you up here for something by running through some of the front pages and leads and the sports pages this morning, because I guess the papers are kind of running 24 hours behind, more than 24 hours behind really, reacting to yesterday morning's results in Tokyo, which is of course Fintan McCarthy and Paul O'Donovan winning gold. There is the front of the Irish Times sports section. Ireland's rowing revolution strikes gold in Land of the Rising Sun. We've got the Irish Sun next up. Skibbereen, white and gold is their front page headline. Cork pair row to Olympic win, first Irish top spot since 2012. And O Row Sheda Vahawalia, Fintan, Paul as good as gold is the back page. The Mirror meanwhile, their front page is rowing for gold, historic days pair win at Tokyo Games. The back page is row stopping us now. The Irish Star meanwhile, black gold, they'll row through Porter and Skibbereen, laughs medal champ. That's the front of the Irish Daily Star. And we want more, we OUI, as they're talking about Paris and the next Olympics already. The Irish Daily Mail front page, well, it's talking about HSE and the jabs as good news 1, but good news 2 is our golden boys row into Olympic history, and the back page is pride of a nation. As you can see, there's plenty of Rassi Erasmus stuff in the sports pages as well this morning, which we'll get to a little bit later on. The Herald goes with rowing heroes already making plans for Paris. We have a copy of the Echo here as well, which as you can imagine is going big in it. Skibba green, white and gold. The Irish Examiner then go with golden boys, and they've got a nice little spread on the front of their sports section. Olympic champions McCarthy and O'Donovan rewrite rowing history, and there is the front of the Irish Examiner this morning. Skib are up in green, white and gold. Adrian, I think you're putting these guys on a real pedestal, especially Paul O'Donovan. I think you're, as I watch Shane Lowry tap in there on the 18th, you're putting him almost above Shane Lowry as one of the most likeable Irish sports people currently playing.
It got us thinking yesterday about who exactly is when we watched Paul O'Donovan and the success he's had and where he stands now in the great sort of Olympians of all time, and he is absolutely right up there now. And you know how likeable he is, and so you tie all those things together, and we've just been talking about Kelly Harrington and Aidan Walsh, who certainly tick that box as well. But it got us wondering about who exactly it is that's Ireland's most loved active sports person. So it's there's a nicheness to the polo, but we stuck it up and like we were thinking when we shot off a few names yesterday, and it was the 4 names we put up in the poll here. He was obviously one of them. Shane Lowry is up there. Katie Taylor obviously is up there. Seamus Coleman is up there as well. So they were the 4 names we went for, and I'll give you a bit of a flavour of some of the other names that came in yesterday where we went at it as well. But as you can see, it's Shane Lowry really who's dominating it here, and he's over 50% of the vote. Then you've Katie on about a quarter of the vote, and then it's kind of split between Paul O'Donovan and Seamus Coleman, who's bringing up the rear on it. But yeah, that's the way it goes. And I mean, it's a good snapshot. There's about 1,000 people who voted on it so far, and we'll keep the poll running over the course of the day. So anybody who's tuned in and wants to get involved, jump on there and cast your vote. It looks like Lowry has sort of won the day. There was a few other people as well that we get into. Kelly Harrington certainly in the mix. Joe Canning is probably in the mix as well, and it's not really a thing that lends itself that well to a GAA player in the parochial nature of GAA players. That, you know, if you're very good for Galway, then you're probably hated by Kilkenny and Clare and a few more as well. But I think Joe Canning is probably in the mix, and particularly for the week that's in it. Tommy Walsh talking during the week saying that he's universally loved, so that'll do for me. Padraig Harrington obviously is in there. Rory was certainly a name that came up when we put it out last night. It's incredible that he still divides opinion that we can't all just get behind a guy who is really good at golf and lives up the road. But look at, there we go. He definitely needs to be on that extended list. Aisha McFerrin, World Cup hero. Cian Lynch probably deserves a shout there. Mick Conlon, Tyg Furlong, Rachel Blackmore, one of the other names that's mentioned. So look, there is an extensive list there, but I think those four, Katie, Lowry, Paul O'Donovan and Seamus Coleman were probably the four that came through. Tough to pick between them on. What's your order?
Ooh, it's a tough one. Like I do think that when we did the sports moments of the decade in 2019, wasn't it, at the end of the decade, Shane Lowry actually beat Katie Taylor in the final of Ireland's greatest sports moment of the decade, which I wasn't surprised with at the time. There was probably a recency bias given he had just won the Claret Jug in 2019, but I do think that there is just this general love for Shane Lowry, which is unmatched by anybody else in Ireland. And I think that if Shane Lowry were to win gold here, for example, this weekend, I think that would be heralded as right up there with maybe not right up there with the Claret Jug, because it's not as big a deal in the golf world as Claret Jug, but it would be the moment of these games, really, wouldn't it, if he were to do that? And it's no disrespect to anybody else in that poll. I think they're all absolute heroes at this stage of the Irish sporting public, but I just think Shane Lowry is just the hero, really.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think I'm surprised actually that Katie is so far behind, because like somebody who changed the face of a sport and actually changed the face of women's sport in this country. Nobody has a bad word to say about her. She touches people from 5 to 105. She's very charismatic when you meet her, and I am actually surprised that she's not further up the list on, to be honest with you, because of everything that she's achieved. I think that, like, I know that she says herself about the stuff that she's achieved after 2012, but I do think that that's the headline of her career, to be honest with you. Like, the fact that she was responsible, let's call it as it is, for having the sport in the Olympics to begin with, and then to go on and win it. So I think that that's certainly the big appeal around Katie. But like with Shane Lowry, he's you, you're him. That's the Lowry appeal for me. Like, he came from nowhere, obviously, in the Irish Open. We all felt a part of that win. Then we feel a part of him now. There's definitely that everyman aspect to him, and I can certainly see why he's topping the poll in that way. But Paul O'Donovan probably suffers on because we only see him once every 4 years, really. Like, I know with the Worlds and stuff, he tends to pierce the consciousness, but I think that's probably a reason behind that. And Seamus Coleman benefits, conversely, from not having gone to United or Liverpool, because then he doesn't cop the hate from everybody else. So he benefits probably from staying at Everton. So
people can still vote on your profile, Adrian?
Yeah, hop on there, and we'll keep the poll rolling till this evening, probably.
Okay, we are going to Tokyo in just a moment. It is 7:47 on this Friday morning. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Let's have a look at what's coming up over the course of the next couple of hours. Irish athletics in the company of Cathal Dennehy coming your way in just a moment. We'll be chatting about the boxers overnight as well. Aidan Walsh securing a bronze medal at least. Kelly Harrington progressing in comprehensive fashion. Ronan Mullen will be with us to analyse both of those fights. And look ahead as well to Kurt Walker, who, let's not forget, is fighting on Sunday morning for a bit of a Super Sunday at the Olympic Games. Olympics latest then, Will O'Callaghan coming your way at 8:20. Anything you might have missed, he'll be bringing you up to speed. Our GAA quick picks are coming up then at 8:30 as we look ahead to 4 massive fixtures across both codes this weekend. Alan Quinlan will be with us to talk about Reply Guy Razzie and plenty more besides ahead of the second test in the Lions Tour at 8:20. A crappy quiz coming your way at 9:10, and then John Giles in conversation with Nathan is coming your way at 9:30. So that is the menu set for you this morning. Rory McIlroy, as we mentioned, comes off the course with a 66. Shane Lowry comes off the course with a 65. They're both on 7 under par, Adrian, I think, as they move into round 3. The leaderboard is starting to get a little bit more stacked as well. You're seeing the likes of Hideki Matsuyama and Colin Morikawa making moves today.
Would love to have seen McIlroy just hang on for that par on the 18th. And that you're hoping now almost that Carlos Ortiz comes back to the pack a little bit. You know, that you don't want to be tomorrow. He's already in the clubhouse today with a brilliant round 65. But you'd like to have seen McIlroy maybe a little bit closer. But look, you'd always say with him, if he's within touching distance, he's got a shout, and we'll be more interested now than we were when today started out. That's for sure.
What else are you looking forward to this weekend?
That's probably going to be right up there. I'm looking forward to seeing the fact that the athletics is now kicked off. So I'm looking forward to, like, there is definitely something a bit more special, and we'll talk to Carl about when he's on, but there's definitely something a bit more special, I think, about the Olympics when it becomes less fragmented, in that it's not at 100 venues anymore. It's all getting very sort of, the circle starts to close in on the main venue, and I think that there's something a bit more special about that. So looking forward to getting into that, yeah.
We can go to the main venue right now. Cathal Dennehy, good evening to you. How are you keeping?
Very good. It's absolutely lashing rain as of the last 45 minutes in Tokyo, so it feels very Irish here in the stadium.
Because on the television coverage this morning, it looked as if a certain section of Tokyo was getting drenched, and everybody was talking about maybe like great humidity in the stadium, and not only that, but this incredibly fast track that was going to be conducive to amazing times and perhaps records tumbling left, right and centre.
Yeah, it's definitely a very fast track. We've seen evidence that this morning. Marie-Jose Talou of the Ivory Coast in the women's 100-metre heats, she ran 10.78. Elaine Thompson of Jamaica, the reigning Olympic champion, ran, I think it was 10.82, and she was jogging. I mean, there's athletes, certainly spikes and new footwear technology is playing a role, but there's no doubts that this is a fast track. And generally, I mean, 90% of the time here, the weather has been ideal for sprinters. They love it warm. Distance runners, not so much with the humidity, but it's perfect for fast running. I think we're going to see some lightning times over the next 2 days as those 100-metre finals get going.
Let's talk about Tom Barr. Were there any nerves on your part watching him come home and on that home stretch? I guess he was helped a little bit by knowing that Warholm was right beside him.
Yeah, I think as some of us in the press tribune, I suppose, were a little bit sceptical, I guess, as he was going around the last bend. He was back in about fourth, but he explained afterwards that basically he'd had a chat with Warholm, the A-list star of his events, the alpha, I suppose, of the 400-metre hurdles, the world record holder, and Warholm was one lane outside him, and he told him in the warm-up, look, I'm going to go out easy, I'm not going to go too hard. You know, it was first 4 out of 8 to go through automatically, so it was very kind of soft, I suppose, qualification criteria, wasn't really going to be at risk. And I think perhaps what lulled Thomas into a bit of a false sense of security was that Warholm, he said to us afterwards, he was like, Warholm going out slow is probably still my fast. So he assumed he was probably going a bit quicker than he actually was going through that first 200. And then as he came around the last bend, I think he got a bit of a fright when he saw 2 guys come up on the lanes inside him. And then suddenly he realised he was in fourth. So he said, better put the hammer down. But as always with Thomas, once he does put that hammer down in the last 100, there's very few people like him in the world who finish as well as him over the last 50. And he moved from fourth up to second, automatic qualifier. And also what helps is it gets him a good lane for the semi-final. He was quite pleased with it. The time was nothing special for him. Not bad, not particularly good, 49.02. He's run 48.39 already this year. But, you know, early morning, first time in the stadium, drowned in sweat with the humidity and the heat that was here this morning before the rain broke. I think he'd be quite pleased with it. And I was saying to him afterwards, like, you know, just looking back on 2 of his best championships, the Europeans in 2018, the Olympics in 2016. From his first round to his second round, he took off about 7/10 of a second both times. Now, doing that again before Sunday's semi-final will put him at about 48.3, 48.4 if he can find that improvement again. He's going to need it, to be honest, because the semi-final draw is already out. He's in against Carson Warholm. He's in against Rai Benjamin. In my mind, if they don't fall over, they're going to be the gold and silver medalists, and there's 3 semi-finals. So he has really got the bum draw here because only the top 2 go through. So I think unless something happens to Benjamin or Warholm, he's going to be running for 3rd place in that heat or 4th place, and it's going to be all about the clock. And I think he knows himself it's going to have to be low 48 seconds, perhaps even high 47 seconds. His national record is 47.97, and that he's going to have to come pretty close to that to get into the final.
Right, so he's right up against it. I was going to ask you if Samba was going to be a contender for the gold or silver, because we actually didn't get to see him perform because Kelly Harrington was on TV earlier on at that same time. So you're writing him out of the gold and silver medal contention, Samba.
I am. He was the alpha dog, I suppose, about 2 years ago, or 2018, I think was his best year. And since then, I guess he's had a few injury problems. It's basically Warholm and Benjamin for gold and silver, and the Brazilian young guy, I think he's only 21 years old, Alisson dos Santos. He's really, really impressive this year. He's 3rd fastest so far this year. Again, is running low 47 seconds. So much can go wrong in the 400-metre hurdles. Thomas realised that very quickly in Oslo the last time he smacked the first hurdle and fell. So there's so much room for calamity that it's all about just getting into that 8-man final. I mean, in Rio, he made the 8-man final and a guy false started, one of the big contenders in the final. So suddenly down to 7 men, then you get a disqualification, you get someone hitting a hurdle. You never know what can happen, but he's going to need the race of his life on Sunday afternoon, or I think it's Sunday evening Irish time, Sunday evening Tokyo time, Sunday afternoon Irish time.
Are you confident that's going to come for him?
I think it's about 50-50.
Right.
In fact, I'd say if you were a bookmaker looking at it, you'd probably say it's more 40% chance. I think there's probably, like, unless a miracle happens with Warholm and Benjamin, he's not going to make the top two in his semi-final. So you're talking about two fastest loser spots or time qualifiers to go across 3 heats of 24 athletes. And I think there's probably 6 to 7 to 8 athletes equally as strong as Thomas here. So you're talking about 8 athletes or so competing for 2 time qualifier spots. So it really is cutthroat. If he'd got an easier heat draw, he could have competed for that first or second place in the heat. He's unfortunately in with the Uber champions too, the fastest men of all time. I think he's fastest man of all time and the 3rd fastest man of all time in history. And he's unfortunately in against them in an Olympic semi-final. So like we said, he's really, really up against it. But again, he's a championship performer. He said he has lots more in the tank and he felt good out there today. So I'd expect to see him go much, much quicker on Sunday.
You're really managing our expectations here, Carl, I have to say, in that I don't feel like confident now listening to you. But come here, look, is it a different, how different of a race is it for Tom Barr if he's effectively running against the clock? You're saying he's not really racing against his opponents here, he's running against the clock.
Yeah, I guess the 400 hurdles is always that game because of their stride pattern. You know, Thomas takes 13 strides between the hurdles, I think it is, up to hurdle 6 or hurdle 7. And, you know, that's something that's been rehearsed so many times his whole life. He's been doing this now for over 10 years. He's been running this event. So, as he said himself to me recently, he's like, I could run the first 5 hurdles with my eyes closed. You know, the stride pattern is that set. So it really is about staying in your lane. But at the same time, what can so often happen is that you can get thrown off. In his semi-final, he's in lane 4, and I think Warholm's in lane 3 on Sunday. So what he's going to see once he gets to that first hurdle, because Warholm goes out like an absolute bat out of hell. Now, he took it easy this morning. He is not going to take it easy in his semi-final. He's going to be trying to lay down a statement because he'll have 2 days rest before the final, and he's in against the other big contender for gold. So I think Thomas is going to see Carson Warholm come up on a lane inside him after about 50 metres, and the key is then really not to panic, to be aware that will happen and to just run his own race. Like we said, it's more than likely going to be a race with 4 or 5 other men to get that 3rd place, to get that 4th place, and then to check the clock and just hope for the best. But like I said, I wouldn't be hugely confident he can do it, but I would certainly not be betting that he wouldn't do it at the same time, because we've seen time and time again, once Thomas gets on the big stage, and he, of course, with no fans here, it doesn't really feel like the big stage, even if it's a beautiful, massive stadium. But once he does get into high pressure situations, he tends to thrive. So I think a lot of people will be waking up on Sunday morning and hope he does the same again.
Yeah, it's going to be an unbelievable couple of days in that event. Just to go through some of the 800 metres, then I guess Nadia Power on the post-race interviews on television came across as the most disappointed.
Yeah, Nadia was certainly, you could see the, I mean, maybe devastation's too strong a word, but it's certainly huge disappointment. Again, it was only later, probably when we were chatting to her, that she did mention that she was sick last week at the holding camp. She spent a few days in bed. And then she immediately followed that up with, I don't want to use it as an excuse, because it's not an excuse. I felt better by the end of last week. I think it was good to see that, you know, she was like, look, maybe mentally it threw me off, but she said physically I was back to normal. I had no reason not to run my best out there. She didn't run her best. There's no point pretending. I mean, you know, sometimes I think, even on Twitter there last night, I said about one of the rowers underperforming, and like Philip Doyle and Sunita, and people took offence to that, the statement of underperforming. But as I said back to someone, if you don't say that these athletes underperform when they do underperform, then it's insulting their ability, because, you know, Nadia is not an athlete who's running 2:03.7 if she gets it right. She's an athlete who's running 2:01, maybe 2 minutes. Same with Chiefra Claire Butner, who ran 2:04.6 today. She's an athlete who should be running around 2:01, certainly 2:02, and that's the expectation she would have set for herself. And to fall 2 to 3 seconds short of what they probably thought they should be running today, there's no doubt that all 3 of the 800 metre girls are going to walk away disappointed. I think specifically Nadia and Chiefra, they, in fairness to them, they gave it a go. They did everything right. They went through into the bell in about halfway in about 59, 60 seconds, got to 600 metres in 1:30. They tried their best to keep up with the best women in the world. But there's really, sometimes it's just, there's no reason for it. You know, they gave it their all. They got to 650, and then the tank just ran dry, really. And they had very long last 100 metres trying to get to the line. But that maybe they could have paced it a bit better. Maybe they could have gone off a bit easier. But then you're essentially saying, in that scenario, I have 0% chance of qualifying. I'm only going to try to qualify and make the top 3. And they didn't do that. They gave it a go. it didn't work out. Sometimes it's just a question of talent. Sometimes for them it's a case of, I guess, progression in their career. They're not quite strong enough to keep up. They don't have the years of training that some of their rivals do. And I think we will see a lot of these girls. They're young enough. We will see them back at World Championships next year in Eugene, over in Oregon. We'll see them at Europeans in Munich next year. And we'll certainly see a lot of them back in Munich. And I think for the experience, for this weird pandemic games experience, they'll all be the better for it.
How much of it is going to come down to, in those future meets that you talk about, just to learning the street smarts and learning almost what this level is like? I mean, there was a couple of unfortunate moments maybe in Shifra's race where she kind of clipped an opponent's heel, I think actually twice in the race, and maybe just with a bit more of an aggressive race position, which probably comes with confidence, that doesn't happen in future?
Yeah, I think that certainly... it's something that has happened to Shifra a few times, both today and at the European indoors. She was kind of almost running into the back of people. And I guess it was surprising for her because she is a product, I guess, of the NCAA system. She went to Villanova University. And if there's one thing that teaches you, it's race craft. You're in against so many athletes who are better than you. You're racing, I don't know, probably 20 times a year you might be racing. So you really do learn how to maneuver around the pack. Shifra today, maybe it wasn't her fault. I just saw those stumble moments like you mentioned. I'm not sure how at fault she was for them, but it's certainly, when you're in a situation like she was in where, even if maybe you run your best, you might only get 5th or 6th. You really do have to do everything right to have any shot of being competitive. And unfortunately, those little errors, that little quarter second or half second, they might have cost her. Ultimately, they were the death knell for her chances.
And when it came to what Nadia Power was talking about afterwards, she just said she felt she didn't really have the legs at a certain point. And I guess, does that come down to almost not knowing where you're at until you actually race at a level like this? And I guess when it comes to Paris and all the big meets between now and then, she will have had the experience of the legs going or the legs not being available to her and kind of knowing how to manoeuvre that situation in future.
I think so, yeah. I think people have to remember, I suppose, with Nadia, that this is essentially her first year as a real full-fledged senior. She won a European under-23 medal 2 years ago, and obviously pandemic paid to everything last year. And then she came out earlier on this year. She ran 2:00.9 to break the national indoor record that was quickly broken by Shifra over 800. And she got so much well-deserved, I guess, exposure for that and attention for that and praise for that. And it was a brilliant breakthrough. But I think ever since, for whatever reason, and I'm sure probably Nadia and her coach, Enda Fitzpatrick, are probably the only people who really know it, she just hasn't quite been able to hit the same level outdoor. That sort of 2:01, 2 minutes kind of times that she was able to do indoors. And I think they'll probably learn a lot from it, though. And I think what we're probably seeing with some of those 800-metre women was that the new qualifying system probably just took the edge off a lot of them. Nadia had been pretty safe ever since March, but not entirely safe under the ranking system to qualify. Shifra Butner was very much not safe. Same for Louise Shanahan, who only qualified on the last weekend. They had to go running around Europe throughout May and June to try and get their qualifiers under that world ranking system. And I think by the time they got here, I wouldn't say it like a case that they were cooked, but certainly if you're preparing to peak on a championship, ideally you wouldn't be traversing Europe, I suppose, for most of May and June. But again, they didn't have much choice. If they wanted to be at the games, that's what they had to do. And I suppose on a positive note as well, I mean, Louise Shanahan is, she wasn't happy with her time. She ran 2:03. She was probably a lot closer to the field than Nadia and Shifra were, but she came through. And I mean, what a breakthrough it's been for her this year. She ran 2:01 indoors. She wasn't going to be going to the games all along, and then pulled it out of the fire on the weekend of the national championship. She won nationals, got big bonus points there, and then she went to Lucerne 3 days later and ran a time quick enough to just sneak in on the rankings. And she came through today, and I think she was a great example, Louise, of it doesn't always have to be about qualifying or even running personal best sometimes. And I'd be hesitant to say that they're happy to be here, but in some cases an athlete as young as her and as progressive as her should walk off the track, and even if they finish 7th, they should be smiling as she was and be extremely proud, knowing that this wasn't even on the radar 6 months ago, and now she's an Olympian. As she said, if the worst thing that happens today is that I became an Olympian, so be it. That's a pretty good day. And I think now it'll be great to watch them looking towards Europeans next year. I mean, the Brits, they have a couple of athletes now running in the 156s, 157s. They've taken it up such a high level. But there's no reason that all three of those girls who ran the 800 metres today can't be looking towards the Europeans next year and saying, I can be in the 800 metre final, and looking towards the World Championships and saying, I can make the World Championships semi-final. And then maybe thinking 3 years down the line, can I possibly get good enough to make an Olympic final? And they'll have learned a lot today.
For sure. The one other event that kind of caught our eye just watching on television this morning, Cathal, were the heats for the women's 100 metres. I mean, over 100 and over 200. I think we're set to have some unbelievable battles over the next couple of days. We saw Dina Asher-Smith's first run out, for example, slightly beaten narrowly in her heat. Who impressed most across the heats for the 100? Because we only got a few of them on TV.
Yeah, I mean, Marie-José Tallou of the Ivory Coast was really impressive, 10:78, which is just an astonishing time. But I think the big comeback for me was probably Elaine Thompson-Herah, the 2016 Olympic champion from Jamaica in the 100 metres. She was kind of always second fiddle until 2016 behind Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce. Now, it's going to be a really interesting final. I don't think the final is at 1:50 p.m. Irish time tomorrow, so it's a nice, friendly, I suppose, sociable time for all the Irish people who've been staying up half the night. And again, the men's final is lunchtime on Sunday as well at the same time. So it'll be those kind of blue ribbon events of the games to not have to get up in the middle of the night to watch them. But I think it's going to come down to, despite what Tallou ran today of the Ivory Coast, I think it's going to be a Jamaican head-to-head. And it's going to be the sprint queen, the two-time Olympic champion, I think four-time world champion Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce versus the reigning Olympic champion Elaine Thompson. I don't know who's going to win. The one thing I know for sure is that Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce is going to lead to halfway. They call her Mommy Rocket. She's the mother of a child as well. And she absolutely rockets out of the blocks. There is no one in the world, there's no one in history no female sprinter who's ever started like Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce. She'll be in front after 30 or 40 metres, but then Elaine Thompson has the better finish. She has the better last 40, 50. She'll be mowing her down. And to be honest, I have no idea who's going to win. I suspect, just going off championship calibre, that it'll be Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce, but that'll be a cracking race to watch. And to be honest, I think it's actually the race I'm probably looking forward to it a lot more than the men's 100 metres, even though the men's generally gets the most hype. But in the post-Bolt era, we don't have that kind of A-list star. Trayvon Bromwell will probably win the men's 100 metres. Again, like Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce, got the best start, can bring it home and has some championship pedigree. But I think in the women's 100 metres, you have those two truly all-time greats of the event in Elaine Thompson and Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce going head-to-head. And then you have people like Dina Asher-Smith, Britain's golden girl, of course, and then Tallou coming out of nowhere as well. So that's going to be a hell of a dust-up for the medals. Yeah, it's going to be a brilliant couple of days. What is it like in the stadium, Cathal? I presume it's fairly impressive. It's very impressive. It's beautiful. Thankfully, they painted the seats a different colour as I look around here, so it doesn't look like it's as empty as it is. But I think the silence is still quite eerie. Even talking to some of the people from World Athletics yesterday in the media centre, a lot of them were kind of saying that, like the swimming has kind of got away with a little bit of an atmosphere because athletes are able to go watch, and being an indoor venue, that noise is kind of exacerbated. Obviously, it's open air here, and there's not going to be that. A lot of the athletes who've competed will already have to ship out of the village and ship out of Tokyo within 24 or 48 hours. So there's not going to be that many athletes here. And obviously there's no cheering in the press box. So there's not going to be much of a cheering or much of an atmosphere. And Thomas Barr kind of said he came out this morning and it felt a bit weird. And he was looking around just to try and find an Irish face. And it was actually the photographer, Brian Keane, was the one he saw. So he was like, right, at least I've seen one Irish person. It kind of feels more like a familiar championship setting. But it is strange. I don't know. I was saying to some of the journalists, they need to like pump up the soundtrack or something, because it just feels kind of wrong almost on the athletes, that this is the thing they've dreamed about for 5 years. And just you get it at national championships and you get it at a Diamond League and stuff, but just when it's the pinnacle of the kind of Olympiad, that 4-year, 5-year cycle that we've had now, you just think, isn't it a kind of a shame that they'll cross the line for the best moment of their careers, for many of them the best moment of their lives, and it'll just be met with a silent soundtrack. It's a pity, but I don't know. The DJ hopefully can work some heroics in the days to come.
Fingers crossed. Cathal Dennehy, great stuff. Thanks a million.
Cheers. Chat soon.